Welcome back to our second video in your week one, learning more about your lab. Specifically, this is all about how to schedule your Dutch test so that we get the right time in your cycle. Are you guys ready to get going? Let's jump in. So as a review, this is what your Dutch test looks like. It is a dried urine sample test, and it is something that is checking out your hormones. And for women who are menstruating, we want it in a certain window in your cycle, which is day 19 through 22. So the question is, what is day 19 through 22? In today's video, you're going to be learning about why we use day 19 through 22 of your cycle, how to find it, and then help you take action. So a little bit of background on your cycle, meet your cycle. What is day 19 through 22 of your cycle? It's a more difficult question, especially when your hormones are out of balance. And this is a much more likely thing to be happening if you are sick or if you're having gut health problems, if you're having any type of chronic illness or high amounts of histamines, any of these things going on. Day 19 through 22 is now a much bigger question mark because normally it would be simply 19 through 22 days after the first day of your most recent period. The first day of your most recent period is day 1, and we even have a little image here. So if you look at here, your period here is on the left, and day 1 of that first of your most recent period is day 1 of your cycle. So you bleed for however many days you bleed. And even if you bleed 4 days, that's, day 4 of your cycle. If you bleed 5 days, a week. And again, realizing, especially when there's other things going on in the body and things that we're working on right now, there's a higher likelihood that there is some irregularity. So that's okay, but you'll just continue counting. And what happens is our phase is pretty much split up into 2 portions. We have the follicular phase, day 1 through 14. Then we ovulate, and then we have the luteal phase from 14 to 28. And what we're trying to hit is this in between. You even has it marked here, day 21 on this image. And so if we're in between 19 through 22, we kind of catch this window. And I love this image for everything except for it's not labeled. But this purple line here is your progesterone, and it is a really important thing. It's really important for sleeping well, for feeling calm. A lot of people who end up with low progesterone, they have low progesterone because of inflammation. And what happens when they have low progesterone is they can be weepy for no reason, feel anxious for no reason. It can often be worse in the morning, but it can happen any time of day. They don't sleep as well at night. Progesterone is this really calming hormone. If you've ever been pregnant, you might remember when you get pregnant, you just sleep a lot and you feel really chill. And that's because your progesterone is sky high when you're pregnant. And so it's not as high when you're in your luteal phase, but it is higher, or it should be higher. And so we're trying to catch it here. The other thing we're looking for is your estrogen, and your estrogen is this blue line here. And it's halfway, and what we're trying to make sure is that your estrogen is not hanging out super high. And a lot of times when there is dysfunction in the gut, we'll see this estrogen doesn't quite make it lower the way we want it to. We end up with estrogen dominance, and that's mood swings and painful periods and irregularities. And so this blue line, it's just a perfect time in the month to check for so many things. The big thing though is that a lot of people's cycle are not 28 days. And so the other thing we're going to be looking for, we're going to base it all off of ovulation. So what we're going to do, if you do have a regular cycle and you're like, yeah, it's every 28 days, you can go for your day 19 through 22. If your cycle is maybe shorter, 27, 26, 25 days, but it's consistently that number of days, all you do is you subtract those number of days from your 19 through 22. So if your cycle is 27 days, you would subtract one number from that window. If your cycle's 26 days, etc. Same for if it's longer, like 29, 30, 31. But it has to be consistently those things. And especially if you're not on the pill, if you're not on something that is controlling your cycle, then you are going to have it's going to change. It might be changing month to month, and that's because your body, it changes month to month. So, my computer, I don't know if you guys saw that, but I'm coming back. All right, so with your cycle, we have the follicular phase, which is, I already mentioned the estrogen, or I already mentioned that follicular phase, it's here on the left, and estrogen and progesterone are both low. As you can see, this blue line's here, the purple's like way low, and the estrogen starts increasing. And then you get ovulation. This is where we have a powerhouse season. We have increased libido, increased energy, and that's partly from the estrogen popping up. Our testosterone also pops up as well. And then in the luteal phase, what happens is if you are tracking or familiar at all with the idea of tracking your basal body temperature or your cervical mucus, things like that, in the luteal phase, your body temperature warms up because progesterone keeps you warmer. You feel more calmer, there's increased sleepiness potentially or sluggishness, and the body is building that uterine linings to, it requires more nutrients from your body, and so that's also some of the other things going on in the luteal phase. Here on the bottom, the second image here, I have a graph of what your temperature typically tends to look like during your cycle. And so this little red period here is approaching your ovulation, but this is right when you start your period, your body temperature drops as your estrogen and your progesterone are dropping. And then after you are done with your period, it stays low. As you approach your ovulation, it drops once more because your estrogen pumps up, and so you lose a little bit of heat when your estrogen's popping up that much. And then after you ovulate, kind of correlating almost like an inverse, if you guys are familiar with inverse graphs, you know, as the estrogen is dropping, the temperature increases, and that's partly because the estrogen is dropping and partly because the progesterone's increasing. So if you're interested in the fertility awareness method, this is what it is, and it just tracks your cycle based off of your body temperature, and it might be something you're interested in doing if you're getting off the pill or if you're trying to do a different form of birth control so that you are not putting in chemicals or hormones into your body and it becomes a little bit more natural. It creates a slightly better healing. I mean, depending on what's going on, it could create a very much better healing situation for your body. And so this is something that you could consider, but just to show how much is changing in 28 days for your body. No day is the same for a woman. And that is part of what makes us so special. And there's even superpower things related to this. I think it's wonderful, but wanted to really quickly go over a couple things. I already mentioned a lot of times, I'll go back here, if you're having problems with your estrogen not clearing out, it'll stay too high over the luteal phase. And I mentioned you'll get something called estrogen dominance. And there's some symptoms. I just wanted to share them real quick. So in case you're like, oh, that sounds like me, realizing your hormones can really be impacting you. And the pill doesn't fix estrogen dominance, and it doesn't fix low progesterone. But symptoms of estrogen dominance are irregular and heavy periods, water retention, breast swelling and tenderness, headaches and migraines, fibrocystic breast changes, weight gain, mood swings, hair loss, painful periods, and PMS of any sort is often caused by too much estrogen. And then estrogen dominance occurs from too much estrogen, which is a detox problem, too little progesterone. Maybe you have a normal amount of estrogen, but not enough progesterone. That's usually an inflammation problem. Or estrogen metabolite excess, which is another detoxification problem, but only in the liver, where the first one might be the liver or the gut. Estrogen dominance is frequently not a problem with your ovaries or something that you would fix. You don't need to be worrying about any other parts of your reproductive system, but do know estrogen is impacting your quality of life. And then symptoms of progesterone deficiency, which is the second most common thing we see in here, and might be something you'll see, is anxiety, sleeplessness, irritability, weepiness, fibrocystic breasts, mid-cycle spotting, menstrual cramps, heavy or irregular menses or your cycle, short cycles or north cycle, which is like early onset menopause. A lot of, you might be one of them, but a lot of my clients will say like, I have early onset menopause, or I feel like I'm perimenopausal. Well, they're not perimenopausal because their estrogen's plenty high, but their progesterone's super low. And so I also see that very commonly with our 20s and 30s-year-olds women, that they are not having a cycle, and it's because their progesterone is super low. They also, another symptom of progesterone deficiency, which is fascinating, is you have a decreased ability of your cells to use thyroid hormone. And so even if you have enough thyroid, you might end up having all these symptoms of low thyroid, which is low energy, weight gain, your skin being really dry, feeling really cold, craving salt, things like that. See how they're all connected, by the way. Progesterone deficiency occurs from inflammation, such as the body getting signals that now is not a good time to get pregnant. It's a pregnancy safety valve. So if you were in a place or period of time where you didn't want to get pregnant because it's a drought or a wartime, this would be a good reason to not have an ovulation or a cycle or your period at all. And the second thing is stress. So physical, emotional, and biochemical stress cause inflammation. And some examples: physical stress include hunger, a car accident, or giving birth. Emotional stress might include grief, unacknowledged or unresolved anger. And then biochemical stressors would be like bacterial overgrowth, parasites, pathogens that we find. That's why we look at all of these things. So progesterone deficiency can be solved without progesterone replacement. We want to solve for upstream inflammation and stress, and the body creates, and then the body will create progesterone again, which I already said, but I wanted to make a slide for it just to really highlight it. So planning your Dutch test, let's get into it. If you have an irregular cycle, you will need an ovulation prediction kit, a calendar, and a cycle tracker app, which is optional but encouraged. An ovulation prediction kit looks like this. If you do have an irregular cycle, we've probably talked about it and sent this to you. If we haven't, you can order it from Amazon. We like Clearblue. It's pretty simple and straightforward to use. What you will do, you can use other ovulation predictor kits. You'll just need to make sure that they sync up. You'll just still follow the instructions the way we give them here, but you can start testing yourself day 7 of your cycle. So 7 days after the first day of your period. When you're going to continue testing and peeing on this strip usually every morning until you get something like an LH surge or peak fertility, whatever language your test uses. And then after that happens, basically your body is testing something called luteinizing hormone. It goes up high, which means you're really close to, you're either ovulating right then or you're close to it. And then you count 5 to 7 days later. And that's when you would plan to do your Dutch test. So 5 to 7 days is, again, realizing it's in that like 19 to 22, you have a window. So what would happen next is, say you count 5 days from now and you're like, I have a test that day, or you have something going on with the kids or whatever, and it's just not a good day to test. Plan to test day 6, or maybe day 7 is a really bad day and day 6 is a bad day, but day 5 is good. So that's why there's a window, and that's okay. They'll all work, but usually pick one of those days in the window that if you're looking ahead, you can say, that'll actually be an okay day to do my Dutch test. And again, read the Dutch test instructions, because there are things on it like not drinking caffeine, not eating certain fruits. I know it might sound weird, but just follow the instructions that it has on there so that you get the best results possible for your effort. You also want your calendar, so you can look at when was your last period? When was your last period? What was the day it started? When is your potential next period, and what is day 7 after that period? And then mark these in your calendar or whatever device or tool you're using to keep track of these things, so that you know when to start using your ovulation predictor kit, and then you can get an idea of like how close are you. If you are, say, 10 days after your period, you can still start your ovulation predictor kit. There's a chance you just ovulated, but you can still do that up until about day 14. It's just that you are having an irregular cycle, so there's a chance you will miss your ovulation if you start it late. But I'd say it's still worth it, because waiting another month to do the Dutch puts a cramp in moving forward with results. And then lastly, what we recommend, but is not necessarily required, is just a cycle tracker app, something that will, you can take your basal body temperature with, and you'll see that dip in your, the low part of your cycle where your temperature is lower, then you'll see it go higher. And that also gives you just a better flow of understanding of your rhythm. So even after you're done taking the Dutch test, you get an idea of what's the rhythm of my cycle, where's my progesterone at, when am I ovulating. This is how people can also know when to use a barrier like a condom if they are sexually active. And then that is an effective way to not become pregnant because you just use a barrier in a certain number of days. We're not going to go over that right now, but you are going to do this. So we have a link for you. So if you go back to your email, there's going to be a link and you can get 20% off of this app. We really like it. It's FDA approved. So the FDA said that they have a good logarithm for determining if someone's fertile or not. And so it's called Natural Cycles, and you can get 20% off with that link. And you also get a basal body temperature thermometer. That's what BBT, it's not Better Belly Therapy thermometer, though that would be pretty cool. So this is something we think is great, but not necessarily required, at least for the Dutch test. So it's time to activate, pull out your calendars, order your ovulation prediction kits, and start thinking about when you will be doing that Dutch test. See you guys later.